Greetings, everybody. I wanted to come on here today to discuss a topic that I believe has been kind of brewing and stewing inside of me the past couple of days, maybe even weeks, as we're in this coronavirus lockdown, this quarantine. There's been a few instances that I've come across personally, as well as just viewing this craziness happen over the internet to other people, where there's just been a complete and utter breakdown of society when it comes to what is deemed the order followers. This is going to be police officers, any type of institution which takes orders from a higher level in order to dictate what people can and cannot do during this time frame. This also encapsulates the people today that are narking on their friends, narking on their neighbors, and I have a video that I want to just show you quickly. It's about 5 minutes long, that kind of just really puts into context exactly what's going on.
But now is not the time to be lax, and it is a mistake. We all have a responsibility. We all have a role in this. We said that from day one, and we have to respect the role that we play.
And I want to reiterate how important it is for people to maintain social distancing when you are outside.
We are doing our best to abide by these same rules and regulations everybody else is.
And this is how it's going to be. We will shut you down, we will cite you, and if we need to, we will arrest you and we will take you to jail.
You know, as a police officer, I'm compelled to make this video. I've been in law enforcement for 10 years, and I'm speaking to my peers, other fellow officers, people in any kind of law enforcement position. I've seen officers nationwide enforcing tyrannical orders against the people. Every time I turn on the television, every time I look to the internet, I'm seeing people arrested or cited for going to church, for traveling on the roadways, for going surfing, opening their businesses, going to the park with their families, or doing nails out of their own house, and arrest them and charge them with what? With a crime? I don't know what crime people are committing by doing nails in their own house. We're seeing this more and more and more, and we need to start looking at ourselves as officers and thinking, is what I'm doing right? Regardless of where you stand on the coronavirus, we don't have the authority to do those things to people just because a mayor or a governor tells you otherwise. We don't get to violate people's constitutional rights because somebody in our chain of command tells us otherwise. It's not how this country works. We're violating people's rights and taking money from them, or even worse, arresting them and depriving them of their freedom when they are exercising their constitutional rights. The Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. We have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their power from the consent of the governed. Our power and any government official's power is derived from the people, okay? We don't hold power over our citizens. It's contradictory to everything that our country stands for. First Amendment rights, telling people they can't go to church, freedom of religion, okay? Telling people they can't protest, freedom of assembly. Fourth Amendment violations, illegal traffic stops to check for papers. What are you, the Gestapo? Is this 1930s Nazi Germany? You don't get to stop people unless you have reasonable suspicion or probable cause that they have committed a crime. These officers that are going out here and enforcing these tyrannical orders, they're widening the gap between public trust and law enforcement officers. Our power that we hold as law enforcement officers, it's nothing more than a facade. It's a badge and a gun. And people, you don't realize, if you haven't lived in anarchy, if you haven't seen combat, things can be stripped from people in a heartbeat. And that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that these actions are going to wake a sleeping giant, i.e. the American people. You know, you don't get to just say, well, I'm doing this because I was told to do so, or I'm following orders, or I need to keep this job. If you're part of a department or an agency that is asking people or asking their officers or their deputies to impose on people's rights and infringe on their freedoms, you need to step up and say, no, that's not me. That's not what I signed up for, and that's going against my oath. And if that costs you your job, so be it. I'll leave you with this, something that I learned as an E-nothing in the Army. No matter what situation you're put in, if you look inside yourself and ask yourself one question, am I doing the right thing? You ask yourself that, you know the answer. And no amount of money or no order or law or anything should be able to make you go against doing the right thing. So I'm imploring officers to look inside themselves and ask themselves, is this what I want to be doing to my citizens? And I think the answer is clear. And if we all stand up together, guess what? It'll be a non-issue, no factor, because people and law enforcement will be united like we should be.
Now, this officer is obviously someone who has gone through a tremendous amount of growth through his own life by challenging himself. You could tell that he was obviously in the Army previously, and he mentioned combat. And when he said and started talking about these things, it just brought up a story that I had essentially had happen in my own life when I was deployed over in Afghanistan on the front lines of combat in Sangin, Afghanistan. And I want to share this story with you because this is something that I've held on to for quite some time, and it really shaped my life in a tremendous way. Now, this was July 16th, 2010. I was on a dismounted patrol with about 17 to 25 British troops, and there were 3 American troops out there, myself, Justice Bartell, and Corporal Brian Keene. And we were finishing up our patrol and heading back to base when we hit a dismounted IED, injuring 3 pretty severely. And as the rest of us went over to go and help out and start to move out the casualties, we struck another dismounted IED. This time I was the 3rd behind that. I was about 15 feet away from this IED. And this unfortunately killed a British Royal Marine and injured severely another one. It actually threw me into a wall as well. The blast, I saw a ball of fire come at me and throw me into a wall. I thought I was dead. I ended up waking up about like 30-40 seconds later or so, after the dust had cleared and settled, or started to, and I was rattled. We were in a fucking mess. This was the worst thing that has happened to me up to this point in the deployment and up to pretty much any point in my life. And at that moment, we realized and we started hearing the ICOM chatter and seeing mopeds disperse, which meant that we were pretty much going to be attacked in this open area, open environment from the Taliban. That was their way that they did business, was they would set off these IEDs and then they would form these L-shaped ambushes. So we had to get into a fighting position right then and there with 5 casualties, two of which one was dead and one was dying. Very egregious, especially when you saw the level of wounds that happened to these guys. And anger was definitely one of the top emotions. Anger and fear are very closely related. So we set up in a cordon, which is just merely a 360 presence. We set up our machine guns. All of us are to set down, other than the people that are triaging are injured. And as I'm sitting up in my cordon where I set up my rifle and I start looking out at my sector of the 360, I actually see about 200 yards out this little girl dressed all in pink with this little like Dora the Explorer haircut. Obviously this little Afghani girl, about 3 years old, and she's just literally sitting there like playing in the mud, just watching what we're doing. And I was just insanely taken aback at this moment where this girl is just like living in this peaceful moment, kind of watching us. And I was just like, what is this girl doing? And obviously I'm looking through my ACOG, which is the scope on my rifle, and I see her turn her head abruptly and look back behind this wall. And she quickly gets up and she runs back behind the wall. And I was like, all right, good. You know, this girl's, no longer in danger, so to speak. And as I train my eye in that same general area, I see two men pop out from around that wall and actually walk over the tree that's about 10 feet away from there. And they just kind of lean up against the tree and they're watching us. And I am going through hell at this point in time, because it's like these two gentlemen who are military-age males could essentially have another detonator or could be coordinating the attack. And I'm itching at this moment, honestly, because I'm going to have to kill these guys. And at that moment, my fear and rage could have justified just pulling the trigger. And I flipped the safety off of my M4 and I sat there with this reticle trained on the older gentleman's forehead, and I sat there watching his hand, watching the other guy's hand as well, to see if there was any weapon, any radio, or anything that could justify me killing these guys. I was going through this mental Rolodex, right? And I sat there in the middle of practically nowhere, in the most war-torn part of the country at this moment, where even if I killed these guys, there wouldn't have been any investigation. There would have been nothing. It would have just happened, and it would have been forgotten, and nobody would have even known, because no one was watching my sector. And I sat there with this reticle trained on this guy's forehead with the perfect kill shot. Literally, I would have dusted him in the tee box, which would have been the perfect kill. And I sat there knowing that he didn't have any weapon, knowing that he didn't have any radio on him or anything. And I sat there thinking about the fact that he was just there in the moment, making sure the safety of his daughter was the most important thing, and he just went out to investigate. And I asked myself the question as I flipped the safety off of my M4. I said, can I live with killing this man? Can I live with it? Essentially, am I doing the right thing? And at that moment, I said, I have a better option. And I just merely pulled the reticle off of his forehead and moved it about 10 inches off to the right. And I fired one shot. And I never saw two human beings move faster in my entire life. And I gave them a warning, saying, don't come back. This is about to get ugly. I didn't kill those two men. I didn't kill any of them that day. I gave that guy another chance at life. I gave him another day with his daughter. And that's something that I could live with. And the other thing that I said was, if he comes back, then that's when he deserves it. That's the right thing to do. And that situation sat very hard with me for quite some time. I toiled over it philosophically for quite some time to see whether or not I did the right thing for years after that. Years. What if that guy was the one who detonated those IEDs? What if he was the one who planted it? What if he did work with some people and all that other stuff? And the thing was, in that moment, I did the right thing. And I did what I had to do in order for me to preserve my life. And that's really what this comes down to, is in doing the right thing, it's not necessarily for anybody else. It is. But the thing that has the greatest reward or the greatest loss is when you do the wrong thing or you don't do the right thing and you have to live with it for the rest of your life. That is a literal hell. That has the ability to tear you down like nobody's business. I have to tell you something. The Corporal Keene, who was on my patrol that day, there were a few instances when we were out there that he didn't do the right thing. And I have to tell you that Keene is no longer here on this planet. I found out about 2 years ago. Keene had developed a nasty heroin habit and overdosed on heroin 2 years ago. And I have to sit there and I have to equate the fact that he probably turned to heroin, he probably turned to this substance after everything that we've gone through, because he had this moral dilemma within him and he knew he didn't do the right thing. Essentially what it comes down to is that there's a cost. There's a cost for not doing the right thing. There's a cost for being in a position of authority and abusing it. There's a cost for being an order follower and ratting and narking on your neighbors in order for you to feel more safe. There's a cost to it. It's not a cost that you can see come out of your account right now, but it is a debt with high interest. And unfortunately, that's the price you're going to pay for not doing the right thing.